Welcome back to Sports Night in Quarantine. I'm Andy Hewley, and I'm joined by Delaney Barrow. We're going to talk about the big sports news going on this week. We're going to start close to home at Auburn University as President Gooch has come out this week talking about the school reopening for fall classes and fall activities, including football. He says will most likely happen in the fall. Gouge's message is saying that we are going to have classes this fall. We are going to have fraternity and sorority activities. We're going to have more than 500 club activities that will be underway with student leadership and participation. So good news, I guess, from his end. Delaney, do you think it's a little early for this, or do you think that it's fair for him to come out and say we're going to return to classes?
I do think it's a little premature about everything to say all of that so soon, but I know that that is what everybody wants to hear. Everybody wants to know that colleges are ready to welcome their students back on campus, that we're going to have football, even if it does look a little different, because there's a possibility that there might only be media allowed in the stadiums and other sporting arenas, but we would still have games that would be able to be watched because if we don't have any sports, the colleges are really going to take a hit with their profits and the amount of money that they bring in. And so I know that President Gouge is saying that to inspire hope in everybody, but also because that's what Auburn really wants, because they need sports.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a little early, but like you said, they're trying to keep everyone positive. But at the same time, I think we know that schools are most likely going to start to open. It's still a long way from now, and things are sort of on the up and up, at least in the South. In other areas, we know that it's not very good, especially like in New York or other big cities that have a lot of cases. But I think at least in the South, it's starting, at least in Alabama and Georgia, it's starting to kind of let up a little bit. So I guess that's good news, and even for us as students, that we'll be able to return, hopefully, to Auburn in the fall. I will say you talked about that it may be different for football because there still is the aspect that there might not be fans for games. Do you see that happening more than likely if school's going to be back, and because the NCAA said that they would only have sports events if students were back in classes?
Well, like the NFL has had talks about if there are fans allowed in stadiums, it would be not even close to filling their full capacity, maybe like a third or a quarter.
Mhm.
So I think that if fans were allowed in games, it would be somewhere along those lines. But I do agree that campuses definitely have to have students there in order to have the games because academics are really the priority. And if students aren't able to be there in person for that, then you could still do sports, but it wouldn't be the same effect. They need to go hand in hand. So if students aren't back on campus, I don't really see sports happening.
Yeah, I agree. And also the fact that college sports is built on the academic world, like you said, it kind of goes hand in hand. Also, if students aren't in the classroom and they're still playing sports, I think, that brings up a conversation where are they being treated more like professionals than college kids? So, I don't think the NCAA wants to deal with that and have those talks because that could lead to more problems and more controversy that they're playing sports on campus, but they're not going to the classroom. So, yeah, I think, there would be a lot of problems there. But I think we're starting to see, though, with other sports that are starting to come back, they're playing with no fans. I know a lot of soccer leagues are doing that in Europe. So the Americans might follow suit, but right now America's still kind of behind where Europe is. So I think there's a lot of conversations about that. But I think the biggest concern I read about this is that people would be outside stadiums like tailgating, or if they're at a soccer game, they might be outside watching the game so they could like at least act like they're there, but not in the stadium. So I think a lot of people were bringing up concerns about that aspect where people would still want to go to the stadium but watch outside like on a TV or something like that. So I think, that maybe brings up problems of social distancing, if that's still a thing in the fall. And then other, concerns are just about mass crowds and stuff like that. So I think they would need to watch out for that if they don't have fans. But I think in total, everyone is for the option to have sports. And if there's no fans, great. I think it's just something that they want to watch. Um, but let's hop into another topic in the Auburn sports world. So Auburn softball is having 3 seniors return for a 5th year of eligibility because of the coronavirus. It would be 2 of them are 2 of Auburn's better players on the team, Tannen Snow and Alyssa Rivera, big names that have been there for several years now. Delaney, what's your reaction to them being able to come back, and how cool is it that they get to return?
I think it's very exciting to have those 3 big name players because Justice Perry is returning as well. And she just received one of the Passion Awards for the dedication and the love that she shows for the game. And to have those players able to return for a 5th season of eligibility, and with the speed that Auburn was picking up the season, they were just starting to hit their stride when all of this happened and the rest of the season got canceled. So I think that they have a lot to prove and they really want to build on what they started this year. I think that's the main reason that those players decided to come back.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's great that they're able to finish their senior year and have a 5th year of eligibility, and that they're already graduated too, so they can focus on the game and play a whole season at Auburn without having classes or things like that. So they'll bring a lot of expertise to those younger players, and we'll see other players have that opportunity. I know spring sports will get the chance for players to come back. I know one of them for baseball who could return is Connor Davis, who had got his senior year cut short. I'm not sure if he said he was coming back or not. I know he had pro options that he could go to, but he does have that chance to return back to Auburn. So that'll be big for softball. Now we're going to jump into the national realm as the MLB is looking at a return to baseball in July. Now, they're only going to be able to play about half of their schedule. But Delaney, like, being honest, I think this is what MLB fans wanted. It's kind of a shortened season where you play, I guess, a lot more games that are probably more important as far as the season aspect, because you haven't even started divisional play or any massive games that are going to be in the standings. You're like halfway through the season, so it brings more stakes into every game going into the playoffs because you're well into the season, not as many games. And I mean, personally, as a baseball fan, I think they play like too many games that like end up not really mattering. I mean, of course, every game matters, but you know, it's just a lot of games. So, do you think that this is a good call to kind of cut the season short, take the losses from the months that we've had to be in quarantine, and just keep on playing?
I think you're right when you say that these games are going to have more high stakes. There's going to be bigger risks that come with losses, bigger rewards that come with wins, and every game is just going to mean more. And obviously, people want sports. No matter how many games they get, they're going to be grateful for what they have because we've had a long drought without any events. And I think that with baseball, the more exciting games, this is just going to I know some people consider baseball to be one of the slower sports because of the duration of the game, and sometimes there's just not as many hits as people would like, lots of strikeouts. And I think that with more weighing on each game, that might be a way to bring some people back to watching the game that maybe kind of lost interest because it just kind of stretched on for too long. So I think that, like you said, the half the games is just going to be for a more exciting season.
Yeah, and would you even be this is just kind of hypothetical, but would you be in favor of them going to 7 innings instead of 9 just because it's like a half a season?
because of all this, or just
Just
like
because
in
of the
general?
coronavirus, not as like a whole thing like where they did keep going with 7 innings, but just for this season.
I think because they're already cutting the number of games in half, shortening the games wouldn't be do as much. But if they had stuck with the original 162 games, then I think that shortening the games to 7 innings would be an interesting take on speeding that up and fitting more games into the smaller time period.
Yeah, I think you're right. That would help for sure. Um, so now another sport that's looking to return had a survey whether they should keep the season and I guess not cancel it, but that was the NBA. They had a survey on whether to start the season and what that'll kind of mean for fans there. Delaney, the NBA is still a few games left till the playoffs currently. What do you think that their best case to save the season is, or should they just cancel it?
I think they should try to save the season. Like you said, there was that survey among the players group, and although not all of them said they were in favor for it, the vast majority were. And I know that especially with the Last Dance documentary still being released on ESPN, everybody is hungry for more basketball. And I think that they really should try to salvage it. I know that Mark Cuban said a couple days ago that he was in favor of a December start date for next NBA season. But I think that if they did start then, that gives time to try to fit in the rest of the season, even if it is just shortened, very few regular season games remaining, and then the playoffs. I think that that is worth investing the time to finishing this year's season.
Yeah, I know the MLS soccer season is thinking about doing the same thing where they're going to just play a few games and then go straight into the playoffs this summer instead of waiting and going in the fall and trying to finish everything. I know the NBA, would like to do that as well. Like you said, I think for every sport except for baseball, I think this is the path for them because you're already in the middle of the season, so it makes no sense to try to finish all the games. And I think it's just play a few more games and then go straight into the playoffs because you pretty much, I think in the NBA, we pretty much knew who was going to the playoffs. It was pretty well set. It wasn't like there was any controversy. Now, sure, if there were races where someone could have overtaken someone to get in a spot, I'm sure like they're not going to be happy. But everyone is suffering from this. Like you're going to have to take your losses where you take them in this year because I think everyone has suffered enough, whether it's off the court or on the court as well. So, it's going to get to a point where you just got to take what happens is what happens and quit complaining about it. So I think with the MLB though, they haven't started the season, so they need to play games, and that's why they're going to play half a season. But these other sports need to take these steps to have a shortened season. Another thing happening is the Zion Williamson case. More NBA news as he's kind of been under the same controversy that Kansas was. We talked about that last week, where Kansas was hiring scouts from Adidas, who is their brand company at the University of Kansas, and they were using them to try to scout high school players and get them into their program. Now Zion went to Duke, and he was reported to be kind of, I guess, had the same thing done by Nike scouts to get him to Duke. Now, I feel like this would be more on Duke's end than really Zion. Obviously, Zion would be kind of in some bad light through this, but they were investigating him that he took money, took some, I guess, some things from the scouts that they gave him so he could go to Duke. Delaney, what do you think about that? Do you think that's true, or do you think that Duke, would not do something like that?
I would like to believe that it's not true, but right now there's a lot of evidence that say that it is. And unfortunately, with the Kansas case also coming to light, I think that this happens all too much. People just aren't aware of it, and they try to keep it as low key and just cover it under the rug and just make sure that people don't know about it. But because it happens so much, sooner or later, certain cases are bound to get leaked. And I think that this is just a case like that. It's bad luck that it happened to be Zion, such a prominent name. But unfortunately, I do think that this is probably, it did happen. And like you said, it probably is mostly on Duke's part. But if it's true, then Zion did accept the bribes and his family accepted whatever the Nike endorsed him with. And so it's a little bit on him too.
Yeah, I think also, this happened almost 2 years ago now. So really, I don't know how much they can. I mean, they can punish Duke, but I really don't know how much they can punish Zion Williamson because he's on a pro team. You can't really just tell him, "Oh, you can't play pro basketball." Like that's not how that works. If he was on Duke, then there would be, some serious stuff for him. I'm sure he may get fined. I don't know how that really works, but I think it's really not going to affect him. It would probably affect Duke more. But yeah, I think you're right. This happens a lot, and this kind of brings into the topic we were discussing earlier with like college sports playing without school happening on campus. Like this brings into the fact that college sports is becoming a lot greater than the college itself, and maybe even there's a case that you could say they could even split off from the academic perspective and just be their own sports league. I mean, that's how much college sports is cared about and cheered about from fans and scouts and people for pro teams looking at the college level as a place for future players on their own teams. It's such a great deal, and I think with these cases with Zion Williamson, just show you that college sports is one of the biggest sought after sports in all the world, and really almost becomes greater than the college experience itself, which is, I mean, sure, it's not a bad thing, but at the same time, it can be a really, distracting thing for college athletes who are there to get an education. So I think that's going to do it for us. We will see you next week as we will have another episode of Sports Night in Quarantine. I'm Andy Hewling, and joined by Delaney Barrow, and we'll see you next week.